Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Sports Performance Podcast. Welcome all new listeners, and welcome back to those who have heard our content in the past. Today, if you want to learn three things that your youth athlete is doing that could lead to injury, you need to tune into this podcast. We're excited to have you. Before I go into the podcast, what is new with our sports performance family? What is happening behind the scenes? There's always things happening with our company, with what we call our sports performance family. At the moment, we are getting ready to rock and roll into a summer. At the time of this recording, it's June, June of 2022. So whenever you're listening back to this, we are getting excited for a great summer. And so one of our goals and missions is to be able to service our community. And we know that during the summer, there's a lot of things happen. People go on vacation. People go, onto summer camps, or maybe they start working on the iPad a little bit more. We know that certain trends or certain things happen. Why? Because we see the injuries that happen afterwards or during. So one of the best things that we're doing now as a company, as we've become more and more established, is actually forecasting and beating our clients to the injuries. That's kind of our biggest mission. One, to get you out of them, but number two is how do we keep you out of it? How do we prevent it? And that's what's going on today in today's podcast. Our obsession is prevention of injuries. Our specialty is management of injuries, but our obsession is really to prevent them and then keep you just doing the things that you love, whether you're an adult and you're working on yourself, whether you are or you have a child who's 15 years old, 16 years old, and you want to keep them healthy. Or you are a young professional and you are enjoying life and you don't want to change it. You don't want to get off track because you love the CrossFit or the F45 or the bodybuilding, whatever it is that you do, or the mountain biking, whatever it is you do. We love it and we get it. So onto this podcast. Why? Okay, so what are three things that your youth athlete, can be doing that's leading them to injury? These are three fundamental principles. Don't get too lost in the weeds here. I'm gonna go down a rabbit hole a couple different places, but ultimately, you need to be listening to the grand scheme of the principle level of what I'm talking about here. So I'm going to run through three main reasons. And if you can do this, you can keep your athlete healthy, your youth athlete healthy. Now, does this apply to you? Yes. However, as you get older, I'm about to hit 40 years old. And as you get older, there's off seasons and there's in seasons of exercise, and we all go through them. But our youth athletes don't really have that choice, and they also have a little bit what we call youth juice. They're younger. They can handle exercise all year long. Maybe they don't stretch, they don't do things, but they might have a season all year long. And for us adults, that might not be the case. So the principles here today are about the ebb and flow of different seasons within a youth athlete's schedule. So let's talk about them. Number one. All right. So coming around the corner into the summer, many youth athletes, they're going to be in either an off season or in season, depending on what you do. So if you're in a club sport, lacrosse, field hockey, soccer, whatever it is, and summers are busy for you, then this is also going to apply. But people who have off seasons, this does apply as well, because if you're in the off season, most people just sit back and they play on their PlayStation or iPad or whatever it is, and they decondition themselves. And so what we're going to do is we're going to talk about both extremes. No off season and a lot of off season, almost too much. So let's talk about that. All right, number one. Year-round sports. Okay, so if your youth athlete is in year-round sports, this can be very detrimental to injury and their overall just their profile, their health profile. Now, and the main reason is that they don't have a chance to what we call deload or unload. They don't have time to work on the necessary things that could prevent injury. And here's what I mean. A fun fact is when people go into sports, let's talk about professional sports, professional athletes. When they go into sports, there's an off season, a preseason, and an in season. When athletes go into an in season, typically they lose weight. Why? Why would you say that? So let's look at an NFL team. an athlete goes into season, maybe August, into preseason, they have a couple games in August, and then they go into season in September. What happens over the summer and spring, they actually bulk up. They add weight, they add mass, they add strength, they add everything else. And in season, because they're training so much, because they're competing at a higher frequency, because they don't have time to recover between, Sunday football game and, training 4 days, 5 days a week, and then going into game day again, they actually don't have time to build back what they just broke down during the game. So that's what leads to injuries. They actually start losing weight throughout the season. So in the preseason and off season is when they actually build the foundation. That's when they get the strongest and biggest. And then in season, they're going to try and maintain it. But a lot of times they actually start decreasing their actual weight. They lose weight, they lose strength, they lose the power. And that's just the normal part of sports. And think about this. If an athlete is training all year round, when is the time to build? When do you build the strength? When do you build flexibility? When do you build it? In season? No. In season, if they're in season all year long, there's never a rebuilding period. It's just a tear down period all year long. So if you ever wonder, wow, my son or daughter or my cousin or my friend has a kid that's always hurt. And we get that. We understand that. Listen, we love helping people, but we love having long-term changes. Like if you ask us, what's the biggest gratification that you guys get as being healthcare providers, not just physical therapists, but healthcare providers, beyond the injury, our passion is keeping you out of pain and away from it, giving you information and education so you can manage it, so that all year long, you know how to manage a full year, that you don't have to depend on injury to come see us. We teach you how to literally work on things all year long. And that way, you know how to navigate it. And so we really facilitate independence with a lot of our youth athletes. We love to teach them about their body, their mechanics, how to control the variables, when to put on size, when to put on mass, when to work on your flexibility, and in season, how to maintain the weight so you don't drop and your performance drops at the same time. So you have to ask, if somebody's playing sports all year round, in season is a deterioration period. So if they're in season all year long, they're deteriorating all year long. And now that deteriorating is a bad word to use, but literally that's what's happening to all the cells in the body. All the aches and the pains come about because there's no recovery process. And you say, well, it's just competitive sports and they have to be in. I totally get that. But I'm going to offer some solutions that you need to know in the event that you have a child that plays year-round sports. And so one of the things that we talk about is there's no deload period. So they're just on every season. So in an ideal world, this is how we break it down. In an ideal world, you would have every 3 months, you get 1 week off. Every 3 months, doesn't matter, pick a period. 3 months, you get a week off. And what you're going to have to do is choose around a low peak period. So some people know that they have, state championships in June, and they have a big tournament in May or in March, and they have a big Christmas tournament in December and a fall tournament out of state in August. If those are your peaks, then you have to know where the valleys are. So probably after that tournament, you got a week off. And what that allows your body to do is repair itself and reestablish and get prepped. Now, for a youth athlete who's under 18 and they have what we call youth juice, it's still a good thing. Don't think that they are, they're resilient to everything. They're very much susceptible to the same injuries that an adult has. They recover a little faster, but the principles still stay the same. If we're very fortunate to work with a lot of professional athletes at Sports Performance, and because of that, one of the things that we do is we'll connect pro athletes with our youth athletes, and we ask, as a pro athlete, what's the number one thing that you would have done to at this age to improve your longevity or improve or streamline the process to get to where you are now? And a lot of them will give us great advice. And these are some of the things that they tell us personally, and that's what we share. And this is one: you always have a deload after a large period of deterioration or progress in a sport. So for instance, if you go January to March, at the end of March, you're taking a week off in April. Then you can go for 3 months, take a week off. Have these peaks and valleys so you have time to recover. So if you're all year long, you have to force it. Maybe your team is not involved, but you know what? You are not your team. Your child is not your team. Your cousin's not your team. You are the smarter athlete. And if you want to be able to sustain this work ethic and this performance at a high level for many years, this is where you have to start. This is the smartest thing. I don't care if they're the superstar player or the fifth string person. It doesn't matter. A body is a body, and it needs to be implemented. So that's the first one. So year-round sports can really put a damper on people's performance. I would highly recommend that you take a week off every minimum 3 months. If you can squeeze it out to 4, but honestly, you can get 4 total weeks off a year, and that's beautiful. Your body will feel it. So you're not going 12 months, you're actually going 11 months hard, but you're getting 1 week in between every 3 months. And so that gives you 4 total weeks off. That's a whole month off of 12 months. That's huge. So start there. Number 2, overtraining. Okay, so overtraining. Now we just talked about a full season, 12 months in a row. We can break that apart and go 3 months with 1 week off, 3 months with 1 week off, and you just repeat. Okay, so that's a full month off. So now let's dive deeper into like a weekly schedule. Now, most people think, well, they're young, they can train 7 days, or, maybe they only train 5 days, so they have 2 days off, maybe a Sunday and a Thursday. I think that for a lot of club teams, that's pretty common, or a lighter day on Thursdays and Sundays are completely off. Now, what that means is overtraining doesn't necessarily just mean that you're like on Thursdays and Sundays, you're just sitting on the couch and letting them do nothing. You have to have some participation in an active recovery. You imagine, you felt it before. Maybe your thigh muscles or your arm muscles after a good workout, they're super sore. And one of the worst things you can do is just like let that sit. Imagine like almost like rust. That's not. It needs to be lubricated. You got to move those things around. So one of the best things you can do is have your child go on a leisurely walk with you. Doesn't have to be super intense. Get on a bike for 20 minutes and just cycle and just pedal. Maybe go for a swim, 15, 20 minutes. If you love surfing, doesn't have to be a big session, maybe 20, 30 minutes. Just something to move, and we call a flush. Just flush all the junk, the lactic acid out of the system. So overtraining is when you are literally going 7 days a week, not having a rest. They should at least have 1 or 2 days where they're having an active recovery portion, where they're just allowing some of that junk to just flush out of there. Now, the thing that we see most often, and if you're a parent and you're listening to this, or somebody, you can shake your head. Most parents think, well, it's 5 days off. What about those other 2 days? We can get them faster. Let's put them on an agility program. Let's get them with a private coach and work on some things. Now, I'm all about that. I am all about that. And if you are a client with us, we always support those things. But when what we do is we'll look at your whole week and see where can we tone down some things to allow you to do those things. You can't go 7 days hard. Your athlete is an amazing athlete. They've got good genetics. However, they're human and their body will break down. And what we're telling you right now is just fine tune what the week looks like. If you're going 7 days a week, 5 days of hard, intense practice, and 2 days where one's with the skills coach and one's with the fitness coach, it might be a little tough, unless, caveat, the skills coach and the fitness coach know how to moderate how much you are doing. Now, that means that they shouldn't be doing all out sprints, all these high end conditioning, high plyometrics, and high intensity, high conditioning. You have to be very careful with these things. Yes, we do have athletes that will train 7 days, but we control the variables. So we'll ask them, what does a Monday through Wednesday look like? What's your Friday look like? What's your Saturday? Do you have a game day this week? So let's pull back just a little bit. Let's work on some stretching. Let's work on some active recovery. Let's work on just a little bit of light stretching, light conditioning. It's knowing how to push and pull. And that's the variables that you always have to do. So there's 4 variables that we always play with: frequency, intensity, time, and type. It's called the FIT principle. And anytime that we have those 4 principles, we're always looking at, in a week, how many times did you practice? 5. Okay, so we know we have to figure out now, what's the intensity? How intense were those? What was the type of training? Well, I did sprints, conditioning. So you did all, lactic acid, all conditioning based stuff. Did you do any strengthening? No. So we can add a little bit of that to maintain the muscle mass. And the type of training. So what type of training did you do? Or the total time under that you did it. I did 60 minutes on Monday to Wednesday. Either way, we're playing math. We're looking at what can we do across the week to allow you to stay productive, not lose muscle mass, and preserve everything from making you worse or putting you in a hole. So ultimately, you can't have your athletes or your kids overtraining too much. Just make sure that they're prioritizing the stretching, rolling out, taking a walk, active recovery. Don't give them too much. Now, if they're in the off season, that's a little different variable. If they're in season, we have to be very careful. In the off season, we can play a little bit more. There's always leeway. And if they're preseason, then we have to shorten that down just a little bit. But where we can make the most gains is in the off season. So we always advocate, if we can have an athlete in the off season, give us a chance, like give us the off season so we can build a great foundation to this pyramid. At the top of the pyramid is skill. Now, this is where our skill set as healthcare providers kind of taps out. This is the coach of that specific sport. We're at the bottom of the pyramid. We're here to teach your child about sleep, nutrition, recovery processes, getting stronger, getting more flexible. If we can have that great base, perfect. Now we can add conditioning on top of that, and then we can add skill. Most people think, well, I have to get their skill better, and I gotta get them faster. So I gotta get them fast and on the field better. But the problem is they're missing this huge foundation at the bottom of the pyramid. They don't sleep. They're playing games, PlayStation on the weekends. They're not recovering, no stretching, no foam rolling, not eating right, zero sleep. So the recovery is down the drain. So everything being worked on the fitness standpoint collapses because it doesn't have a foundation underneath. I promise, I see it. We've worked in the pros. I've literally lived this day in, day out. And the conversations I've had with pro athletes is the same that I have with parents at Sports Performance. So overtrain. Do not do too much, especially in season. All right. So now what about the preseason? There's this gap. So the off season is where you make the most gains. In season, you have to be very, very careful because their priority is skill. You don't want to have them lose mass or strength. So what do you do in the in season? Like now we have this gap. You made them big and strong and resilient and flexible. And there's this other portion where now we're getting into skill and they're doing conditioning and speed. Now, what about the preseason? Now, this is where your child or athlete gets really game ready. Like it's not just off season. Off season builds this huge foundation. And now there's in season. Now there's this gap. This is where literally now you make all the gains. This is where you work on agility, plyometrics, getting faster, stronger, all the above. Off season, get them big, bulky, strong, flexible. And now let's work on speed and conditioning on that preseason, get them fit. And most people get this, and this is a conversation we have with most parents. This is where sport-specific training and programming comes in, right? Strength, agility, conditioning, everything else, and speed. Most people will put their kids in without a preseason, go straight into an in-season type of a training. And they had no off-season training, no preseason, and they just show up. Now, here's an example. You ever seen athletes or kids go into cross-country training and they go straight in? There's like no time. And they didn't do it over the summer and they get into the fall and they just go right in. What's that a recipe for? Shin splints. So what do we get in September at Sports Performance? Shin splints. And the parents are always like, well, what can we do? The problem is that should have started in May, June, July, August. That's the reality of it. So we are all about helping people, but the reality is it's a little harder for us because now they're going to miss, 2 weeks, 4 weeks, or 6 weeks with shin splints. And now we got to get them strong, but we can't get them strong because they're going to lose weight throughout the season. So now we have to balance this. Like we just wish we could put a little bit of strength and flexibility into them early, build a foundation, get them into, agility training so those shins and their feet are ready to tolerate more repetitions. And so when they go into the season, they are prepped and ready. And so most parents start with us because of injury. And then we get them out of their season. They get through the season, we'll keep them in, and then we bring them into off-season training where we can work on performance training, get them strong, get them flexible, and then they learn the principles on how to recover, what type of foods to eat, nutrition. From there, then we seamlessly bring them into preseason, develop the speed and agility coordination, develop the plyometrics, develop the impact progression, so that for the next season, now they're ready. You can see how this is a full year of training. Now, don't be overwhelmed by that. But what I'm saying, in an ideal scenario, this is how pro sports work. I've worked in it. I've done it for over a decade. This is exactly how it works in every single sport. It's at the highest level. How do you map out an athlete's training? Just like this. And so what we're saying is, you can't have your athlete all year round without breaks, 1 week after every 3 months. You can't have them overtraining 5 days a week of high intensity in season, plus a skills day with a pro, like a skills coach, and then a conditioning day with a personal trainer or fitness coach. You can't do it in season, especially if they're not used to it. They need recovery days, maybe in the off season, maybe even into the preseason, but not in season. And then lastly, just making sure that their preseason is the time where they're doing all of the things that we just talked about. Off season, let's get them strong and flexible. Preseason, let's get them fast, moving great, work on the coordination. And then in season, they're just doing the darn thing. They're just literally finishing off everything that we worked on. So ultimately, I wanted to cover the 3 things that every youth athlete can be doing that may be causing them injury. And as a parent, I'm a parent, I have 3 kids, Zach, Alex, and Jacob. And, as I see them starting to get into sports, it's very, you get motivated to push them a little bit more, but you have to realize that their little bodies need a rest and recover, and there is equations on this. And just because maybe you, as in growing up, that you as an athlete just work through things, it's different now. It's a different sport, it's a different mentality, it's a different all year long, it's different club, it's different high school, it's very, very different. Same human bodies, different platform that they have to compete in, more pressure, more athletes. There's a lot going on, and we understand that because we're seeing that the evolution over the last 3 to 5 years of high level athletics has changed dramatically. And so because of that, our feedback is we're just giving it a little bit faster and ideal to what we highly recommend and what we're seeing with parents and what we work with pro athletes, and we're bringing that to you guys. So all this information comes from our pro athletes, all the healthcare providers, our massage therapists, our performance coaches, our physical therapists, and everybody here. So we brought together this compilation of feedback to be able to keep your youth athletes healthy. Now, if that sounds like you, if you're like, what, I am concerned, that I think that I might be overtraining, or my kid can use a little bit of support. If that sounds like you and you're like, hey, what's the next step? The next thing I would do is contact us, let us know, teamsp@sportsperformancept.com, or head over to our website, sportsperformancept.com, and submit any of our forms. We have free ebooks on there to help your athlete. But if you're looking for like straight advice, what should I do to start this process? I'd say get connected with us. One of our specialists will just kind of help navigate like where do you start? Who's the best provider? Do you work with fitness coaching first? Do you work with the medical healthcare providers first? When do they need what at what phase? And at that point, we can help you. But most people think that they have to start with the personal training or fitness coach. You don't. Sometimes it's just about education on the front end. Do they just need a little bit of guidance? We call bumpers. This is how much you sleep. This is how much your program should have. Take these days off. Work on this for 2 months. Come back. Work on this. So in that domain, that's how we help people the best. So what I would do is start with, one of our discovery visits, just see where it is you need to start, and then start talking to any of our specialists, figure out what your kids needs, and we'll push them in the right direction, and then just check in and say, hey, what's next for me? If that sounds like you, or if you have a friend or a family member who has a child who might need this, share this episode with them. This is like what we love. Injury prevention, helping youth athletes train like pro athletes. It's amazing. So, and if this sounds like you too, and you're almost 40 years old like myself, you can use some of these principles as well. So I hope that helps wherever you are in this world. I hope you're staying healthy and staying active and away from injuries. All right, everyone, we will see you on the next episode. Take care.